And good morning from Mystery Island, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff, Kennedy's Man to Smash the CIA. And this morning we have a very, very special show for you. I'm going to be turning the show over to George Webb, who's conducting this morning, I think, the world's very first virtual book signing. So, George Webb, and sitting behind me is our first guest, Addy. So, George, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what your plans are for today?
Well, September 11th at 11 o'clock, we were going to be at National Harbor, which is, I believe you were born close to that place in Oxon Hill, John?
I was born in D.C.,
you grew up.
but grew up in Oxon Hill, Maryland, which is the home of National Harbor.
Right. And so that was the idea. McDuff had chosen that place. The FBI agent McDuff, that we call McDuff, was from there, and that's why we're going to do the thing on September 11th. And the whole idea was, if we would have had McDuff, some people call it, what would McDuff have done?
Are we on, or have we lost our stream already?
Check. What if McDuff had been running YouTube? It probably would remain more reliable.
It says it's live.
Set live. Okay, I think we're still live. Yeah. Okay.
Are we still live, guys?
Yeah.
Somebody tell us on the chat room.
Yeah, they are live. Okay.
Oh, super. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Thought we lost it.
Yeah. So I'll do that over the radio, so we won't. So the idea is we're going to have this book signing, but we had 3 flash flood warnings yesterday here on this island. I think everybody here can attest to the torrential rains we had, and we had to make a call yesterday about getting the van to take everybody up to, and it's very expensive. So we made the call. We're going to have to do this virtually, but we're still, if you send me a message and with your name and address, I'm going to send you 2 books. I'm going to send you a copy of my first book that wasn't banned by Amazon. These are both bestsellers, which is Blackberries Matter, and then I'm going to send you Let's Call Him McDuff. I don't have printed versions of Anthrax 9/11, which is about the Corona and Anthrax program with PAC ISI yet, so I can't send you that. So what I thought we'd do here is have a virtual, like you said, this is the first time ever in television history, so this is great to be a part of it. You're all a part of it. Last time we were all together, we created YouTube history as well. This is the idea. So we're going to have our people who are citizen journalists who have come here to this island play the role of, and they're not really playing a role, they're coming up and getting their books signed. And they're getting, like we did in La Jolla, you're asking questions about what's in the book, and why did you leave this out, or can you verify this fact for me, and that sort of thing. Or this is the next book I would like to see. So that's the idea here. And I want to introduce to you, for all those of you who don't know in the worldwide audience, Addy Ads. Addy Ads right here.
Hi, folks.
Yep. We got the under 25 demographic. Everyone says it's cat ladies who've had grandchildren die of overdoses. That's my only constituent.
In tennis shoes, right?
Well, everyone says, oh, George's channel is cat ladies with grandchildren that have died of overdoses. That is certainly not true. Addy is right here. He's not died from any kind of overdose. I don't think you've ever done that type of drug.
Negative.
Negative, correct. Right. So this is, Addy's going to talk to this demographic. And you're reading the book. And the key here is there's something in this book for the younger generation. And everyone's going to have their own perspective on this. But Addy, why don't you take us through the book that you've read so far, about halfway through it, I think.
Yep.
You could read it in about an hour, and just take us through the questions and things that you may have.
Sure, yeah. And you mentioned the younger generation. It reminds me of an assignment I had in high school for a term paper, which I procrastinated, and I ended up writing about the Kennedy assassination in one day, a 10-page term paper. And my theory was the CIA did it, and I was, in a matter of probably 8 hours of just stuck at home while everybody went to the beach getting this done. So it made me think of that. But before I get to a specific question, George, I wanted to ask you about your first recollection of your first interaction that you can remember with McDuff, with John's dad. And I wanted to thank John for hosting me on his channel as well.
Well, actually, it's in this book, my meeting with John You can maybe tell it from your perspective. Why don't you tell it from your perspective?
Well, George, you wrote it, and I think you did a great job of putting it together. But well, from my point of view, Addy, I'm so glad you're here, and you're very, very welcome here to McDuff Channel, and McDuff Channel is glad to be here at the George Webb newsroom, where everybody has gathered here, and it's good morning to everyone that's here. The people out in the internet universe can't see all the smiling faces around us, but a lot of great researchers have joined you, George, here today for this event. Well, my contact with George was. It was just one of those things of internal courage that you sometimes you muster, and sometimes you don't. And I didn't know George or anybody that did any real journalism. I was like working on trying to resolve what really happened to my dad, because I had pretty much finished my law practice. I had time finally to look into it, and I had spent a couple of years on my own doing my own reading and watching things, and I landed on George's channel one day. And this was like in the beginning when you were still just using your hands. You remember when you were using your hands on slides?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, this guy's interesting. And I started realizing that you're investigating something that's very close to the history of my father.
Right.
So I picked up the phone and got in touch with Jason, who was with you. That was right before you guys split up.
Right.
And so and Jason said, yeah, well, we're down here in D.C. We're at this certain restaurant. Come on down. So I got in the car and went on down there. And we met each other, and it was very, very, very nice gentleman to meet. I was happy to talk to both of you. Jason excused himself, and George and I went outside on the outside bar there and sat there, and we must have talked for 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
It just went on and on and on. And because, I mean, I was thinking of my father in terms of Shakespearean ideals and things. And here's a guy that's an expert on Shakespeare, which is George. You all don't know that, but George is quite the literary expert as well as everything else. And he's getting shy now, but my goodness, what a conversation. And with that as a beginning, I knew that we were going to have an ongoing relationship, and we have, and it's been very, very fruitful. So thanks for that question, Addy.
Yeah, no problem.
And I'd like to kick in because a lot of Shakespeare's plays were about a person who was trying to figure things out. We talked about, I think, Mel Gibson does a good job of, he's in the Something's Rotten in Denmark play, that shall not be, I don't want to get a copyright strike. But he's trying to figure out who killed my dad and all this stuff. And and then McDuff, we wanted to go with a character who is summoned at the end and wins, the Macbeth character, lead on McDuff. And we thought about that other play, which was, the guy, with I'll say Hamlet, and Hamlet does not end well. Everybody dies. Everybody gets the poisoned sword, and it was like, I don't want to have this be an Italian, spaghetti opera where everybody kills everybody at the end in the last 5 minutes. I want this to be where we win, and that's why I chose the character of Macduff. I think we went through about 8 plays to figure out who the best character would be. We from one end of Shakespeare to the other, but it had to be Shakespeare because Shakespeare has this intrigue. It has this courtly backstabbing that Trump is in right now. And for it to be instructive, for it to be relevant to now, it had to apply to Trump. And that's how Macduff was born. Let's call him Macduff is the last, phrase that we decided, and that's the name of the book.
And I'm coming from history is probably my strong point is World War II. And just going on page 21 here, you talk about the Paperclippers a bit from Operation Paperclip, where the U.S. government brought over German scientists to the United States. And you mentioned 3 characters, 2 of which are quite, I think, familiar to a lot of us. And that's the chess master himself, Henry Kissinger, and Allen Dulles. But then you also mention Reinhard Gehlen, who I actually don't know much, if at all, about. So I was wondering if you could just give us a character profile of Reinhard Gehlen.
Well, I'm going to flip this over to McDuff in a second, but I didn't know who Reinhard Gehlen was very much either until I met John. And I was familiar with the Paperclip Nazis, but if you remember, when I go through the McDuff book, an orange notebook, I think is here somewhere, it says Operation Paperclip and Annie Jacobson. You have to read this book. And he took me over to Fort Washington. We went over there with task force, you remember? And you did a whole thing about Fort Washington and the Battle of 1812.
Right, the fascinating Battle of Fort Washington, Maryland, which is a story I will tell myself one day. It hasn't been published, and but it's a great story. I told it to George and
Task Force
back 2.5 years ago now.
Three. Yeah.
But anyway, that's right. And while we were talking about Shakespeare, I have to tell you that I think that there's another character that's part of my father, and that is Othello, the Moor of Venice, because in his dying speech, and of course he dies in the end, he says something that I think my father would say: "I have done the state some service, and they know it."
I like that. That's beautiful. Well, we don't have to be limited to our Shakespeare references. I mean, we could use them all. And so remember that, audience. Othello in the next book, when Macduff goes on the road to solve our problems right now, in a speculative fiction book I'm working on. Well, to get back to the Fort Washington story.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, no.
Galen, yeah.
Yeah, Galen. John says, "Are you familiar with the Fort Hunt Agreement?" And I'm like, "No." And I said, "Is that over by Fort Belvoir where, I found the blackberries?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, it is actually. The Fort Hunt was this place. And why don't you take it from there, John, on the Fort Hunt Agreement?"
Well, I had, in my own studies before I met George, run into the Annie Jacobson book, an excellent book called Operation Paperclip. And I don't remember how it was, but I started realizing this guy named Reinhard Gehlen was key to understanding what happened at the end of the war. And what happened was the most shocking, horrible thing that I could imagine happening, and that is that our OSS made a deal with the SS. And who was at the key of that was Allen Dulles and Reinhard Gehlen. And Gehlen was the German intelligence chief from the Soviet and Eastern Europe portion for Hitler. I mean, this was one of Hitler's top guys, okay? And he had anticipated the end of the war, like a lot of the top Nazis did, and had made a plan that he executed at the end of the war and got in touch with Allen Dulles through intermediaries. And there he ends up getting a free ride on an American military plane to Virginia, and then they put him in this place called Fort Hunt, which is right across the river from Fort Washington. I mean, you could do semaphore messages back and forth. It's that direct. And Fort Hunt is an old military installation that was part of these batteries that were built around Washington in the 1890s. So it was an old, dilapidated, unused area. But they built some nice housing there for the General Gehlen and his entourage, and then they spent the next year or two debriefing them. And as part of that resulted in what's called the Fort Hunt Agreement. Now, it's not a written agreement. It's a gentleman's agreement, according to Gehlen, who said, we're gentlemen, we don't need paper, we've got this agreement. But the agreement basically said that Gehlen was going to set up the BND, the German intelligence service after the war, on the West German intelligence service. He was going to run it as a German, not as a part of the American intelligence agency, but he was going to set up, and he was going to remain. He didn't become an American. He was still a German, running this intelligence service in connection with what became the CIA, and these two bodies basically worked together behind the scenes to create the Cold War that we know, that we've had to live through. It's a horrible, horrible thing to realize that our CIA people made a deal with the SS, but that we have been living with that ever since 1946, George.
Yeah, and the other amazing piece to this, again with a potential McDuff connection here, is it was so close to Oxon Hill, so close to where you guys lived at Fort Washington. It's the next town, basically. And looking right across is the birthplace of Paperclip in America. And these people were being put into these warfare centers. We have a warfare center right across the Potomac. You can't see it, at Dahlgren. And they were being put into these places like the other place on the other side of the river, which was called Indian Head, which was more the explosives and so forth, propellant for torpedoes. All these scientists, these German scientists, were being slotted into places like the torpedo factory in Alexandria. And, that was just, it was an onslaught. Then NASA later is formed, and everybody knows the Werner von Braun story. So Fort Hunt, again, I didn't know anything about it. This is where how citizen journalism works hand in hand with historians to go, hey, wait a minute, what's happening now, maybe with Imran 1, is the same kind of paperclip operation. It just changed the flags. But it's the same kind of operation. So I don't know if that answers your question, but...
No, yeah, it does. Thank you, John and George. And I actually had a question for John that was a little more general about your father. And was there a single event or piece of information that you came to know about that shocked you the most, that maybe you didn't know while he was alive?
I would say the thing that has affected me, and shock might be too acute a word, but I'm the emotional effect of realizing that none of my father's colleagues would ever speak to me, ever, from the day that he died, and that his boss at the time was General Leroy F. Manor, and General Leroy F. Manor flew to the funeral from the Philippines, where he was stationed at the time, and he came to that wake, and there was all kinds of military people and stuff, that nobody talked to us. And we were sitting there by ourselves, and General Manor comes over to us, and I remember he had on like a summer weight suit that wouldn't be appropriate for a funeral, but he said, I'm sorry I didn't have chance to, so he said, I excused himself for that. But then he said, your father was a great man, and that's all we can tell you. That's all we can say. And the shock of realizing that I was going to have to live the rest of my life without knowing anything about what his real colleagues thought of him, without anybody telling me any anecdotes, or, we went out to lunch one day and he had this event, it was beyond horrible for our family to try to go on without anybody explaining to us, who my dad really was and what happened. So I guess that's the biggest thing, and it's still with me today, Addy, is that how could anybody treat a colleague's son and daughter and widow with such callous disregard? That, to me, is the attitude that expresses my horror at what our country is looking at right now, because this is the idea of this deep state, is that they are going to be in charge of everything and everybody, and they're going to tell you what the truth is, and you damn sure better believe them, because if you don't, bad things are going to happen. And we can't let this happen. We can't let this happen to our country. We cannot do it. Too many people have stood up in our past to stop it. From the very beginning, we've been under threat. And the American people have now been so put to sleep by the media and all the cultural crap that we've been thrown at us, that I can't believe how vulnerable we've become. But you know, you talk about Alexandra Chalupa and this plan to impose a color revolution here in the United States. And I see the dang thing unfolding. And the American people are like, you know, well, just what's going to happen next? You know, let's watch it on television as our entire republic crumbles. That is what shocks me the most. You pulled a string. I'm sorry, but there you go.
Well, thanks, John, for the vulnerability and the truthfulness with that response. It's much appreciated.
Can I have a shot at that too?
Yeah, of course, sure.
I don't have that personal connection with McDuff. I think you read this book, you get it. And as you do this research, you get that connection. But in the two documents that I found that surprised me the most was one document I reproduced in the book. I don't know exactly where the memorandum is, but I reproduce the memo where it's talking about the McDuff and his involvement in investigating Jack Ruby, and Oswald after the Kennedy assassination. And you want to talk about a shocker when we came across that? It's like, holy mother. He's the guy in charge of all the military intelligence, collating all the military intelligence about Oswald and Ruby. Remember, Ruby's a gun runner for Mossad, right? So those two, and a key gun runner for Bay of Pigs. Our McDuff is brought in basically as a fix for the Bay of Pigs. He's brought in after Bay of Pigs to say, how the hell did this happen? Let's make sure it doesn't happen again, right? So when I found that, I said, oh my God, this McDuff here, the right-hand man basically of Hoover. I thought he was just the right-hand man of Kennedy and McGeorge Bundy and the folks that were in the White House. And that's why Hoover's sending him over to fix Bay of Pigs. But now the connection to Hoover also is there. And to get to the bottom of this deep state of taking over and doing all these fun and games, as Alan Dulles called it, without presidential approval. So that was the first thing when I found McDuff was in that. And now the chase is on, the digging is on to find out, when did McDuff start researching Oswald? When did he start researching Ruby? We know that there was a raid, an FBI raid in July of 1963, and they raided the camp in Lake Pontchartrain. We know Oswald offered the Cuban revolutionary groups biochemical weapons and weapons. Was he getting those from Houma, Louisiana? Where was he getting? Where was it? The Schlumberger revetment, the cash? We don't know that. Then we find the next shocker, which is incredibly, ironically called Operation Shocker, which is McDuff seems to be checking the CIA with the CIA feeding secrets about biological weapons to the Russians for the VX nerve gas, which becomes in its improvements 10 times more effective than VX nerve gas, Novichok. Novichok that is poisoning all these ex-business partners of Christopher Steele right now, Porton Down, Salisbury Plain, all the druids around, the Stonehenge right now. So, and this DynCorp, this joint venture between DynCorp in the United States and Porton Down, you want to talk about Ghouta and you want to talk about Aleppo and the Syrian war, again, Porton Down, so he's entangled in two of these incredible stories about nerve gas and also the Oswald thing. Now you can take all the other books. In doing this research, I never was a Kennedy researcher. As soon as I found Oswald had a CIA background, and Oswald, the McCone memo says this clearly. I reproduced the memo that Oswald was flying surveillance flights. I think that you're going to find that there were U-2 flights in 1958 in China. He was just down the river here in Quantico, trained as a CIA guy. He had the language training in Russian. In 59, he was here. He was sent back in 60, or the end of 59, and spent a year and a half at the radar location in Belarus. Would McDuff have not known that? Would there not have been a file? We know that Oswald's cryptonym was GP Floor. We know Oswald was an operative. We just don't know if he was passing the U-2 secrets, the to and from airport or air bases of the flights and the elevation. Most of these flights are in a straight line or close to a straight line, so you could just with a ruler figure out where you had to put your Mark V missile. And then the critical other piece of information was altitude. That's all you needed to queer the Paris peace talks between Khrushchev and Eisenhower. You give me that one piece of information, and when did that one piece of information go to the Russians? May 1st, May Day, the same day that they parade all the missiles through Red Square. That's the day that Gary Powers gets shot down. Gary Powers, the U-2 pilot, this is the spy plane created by this guy named Bissell, right? Gary Powers said Oswald leaked the information that got me shot down. So that is, Oswald is a YouTube feed, is the other thing. Would McDuff not have known that? Remember, here's the top counterintelligence guy for Hoover. He's sent over to Kennedy, probably on the recommendation of somebody like a General Moore or even a...
well, it could have been Krulak.
Krulak.
It could have been General Krulak because as I've now surmised, my father seems to have been somewhat of an expert in the same subject that Krulak was, and that is the use of those, what do you call those boats with they flop open in the front when you hit the beach?
Landing craft, the LCs, yeah.
Those LCTs and LC whatevers, those things were the key towards all of the amphibious landings, and Krulak ran them in the Mediterranean. And it looks like my father may very well have been part of coordinating that effort at the Battle of Leyte Gulf, and then onward. And when your father was involved at Mindoro, I think it was. Or
well,
Mindanao.
they're Mindanao,
Mindanao.
and then, but he also was involved with those landing crafts at Guadalcanal, Bougainville, and New Georgia. So, you see the MacArthur. Is the one that you normally see with the landing craft, and he walks on shore.
Yeah.
We now know that MacArthur was recommending people for the for McGeorge Bundy's Joint Chiefs as experts. We're down to the level of going to this SACSA, which is this last chance, this last time there was a check on the CIA by the presidency. This SACSA's this check, and we're now going through all the org charts. And drilling down with the relatives that are still alive. So we got a lot of research that's ahead of us here on this subject.
Yeah, just for the fun of it, I'll show you one of those org charts. That shows you where Prouty is. If you study it, you can see Prouty. And my father's office is there. His name's not on it, but that's the org chart that has helped me a lot to understand how close my dad and Prouty were. And as well as to just look at all the other names on there. Anyway, just thought I'd show you that for fun.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, Addy.
Yeah, could we actually show a picture of McDuff before?
Sure. We'll put it up. I think a lot of people who follow John's channel may have seen this picture already.
This looks like the quintessential 1950s G-man, doesn't he?
It's an astonishing picture. I'd like to give you my take on it. The first thing, this is in about is right after he got married. They would have moved into their apartment, and this is his car, and he's an FBI agent with, at this point, he's had a year of service in the Atlanta field office. He's married my mother, and he has now been transferred to D.C. to work directly under Hoover or through the Washington field office. At that time, he was under terrific pressure from his family not to go, with his dreams of, serving the public, but to go back and be one of those lawyers that works for the deep state, the old money of New England. And he absolutely would not do it. And so he, instead of joining the law firm, he joins the FBI, I'm going to do it my way. He ends up in the FBI, but he's still got all this pressure from back home in Hartford, Connecticut. And I think some of that was quite serious pressure. And so he had, I'm sure my mother must have taken this picture, a picture of him with a don't even think about it look on his face. And he's got in his hand a very large bulge in his pocket there. And I don't think it's too hard to imagine what that is telling to anybody that looks at this picture is, you know, I'm packing, and if you try anything with my family, you're dead.
And you mentioned the connection to Israel, George, and you ask a question here on page 30. You said, did McDuff pick up on the tension between Kennedy and Ben-Gurion as it relates to the bomb? And even to this day, they still won't admit that they have nukes, even though everybody kind of knows that they do about it. I wondered if you have expanded your knowledge on answering that question since you've written the book.
Well, Ben-Gurion certainly was getting the nuclear secrets from James Angleton, which is going to be the big McDuff nemesis that I don't think we know about right now. Richard Bissell is the easy character to draw as the Richard III here. Richard Bissell, Richard III, he's the guy with the U-2 spy plane fun and games, and then he goes on to the Cuban Missile Crisis fun and games. But the one that nobody really looks at is the struggle with Ben-Gurion, and Ben-Gurion wanting the bomb, and Angleton actually going to Dimona, where the nuclear program of Israel is, and actually doing tree cuttings, little tree trimmings to make sure that the radioactive gases that were off gases from this enrichment process were at the 97% level. So he's, everyone says that Angleton was this botanist that liked to raise roses. No, Angleton knew that living organisms could be used at testing and in intelligence gathering for radioactive materials. And that was Angleton's specialty. He wasn't just a white rose grower for the Richard III, doing those white roses.
And Angleton was the head of the OSS during World War II, the European arm, correct?
The Italian branch. And this comes into with Reinhard Gehlen again, because Reinhard Gehlen meets Allen Dulles in September of 1944. We hadn't even had the Battle of the Bulge yet, and Gehlen is talking about the getting these Nazi high command intelligence officers out of Italy. Italy's flip sides, right? And now we're going to a submarine bullpen in Naples, Italy, and these guys are being extracted, and they're paying they're getting the Maltese passports. They're paying I can't remember which pope it was, but the intelligence officer named Wolf is paying in Nazi gold to the pope, and they're getting their Buttigieg, Knights of Malta passport, which allows you diplomatic immunity and also to go in any country in the world where there's a lot of Catholic churches, and most of them end up going to South America before they coalesce later on in Cuba as they diaspora to South America, and then they recongeal, and the plan is to recongeal around Cuba in 1962. 15 years have gone by. A lot of people don't remember who handed out the soap at the death camps. We still have all the IG Farben properties from Martin Bormann. Now it's time to take our industrial knowledge and strength and move it into the United States. And what portal are we going to use? We're going to use the port of New Orleans. We're going to bring it in through a device called the Perm Index. And this has been, we've talked to so many authors, and McDuff's in the middle of this maelstrom. So he's there in Oxon Hill overlooking the semaphore signals with Gehlen there, and here's Angleton being in OSS in Italy, being the key sort of pathfinder to get the Nazis out of we're near Bolzano in the northern, hiding out in the Alps, and then when the coast was clear, they were leaving on these submarines. That's how Angleton got into Italy when he first was an OSS officer, and that's his chosen secret method of exfiltrating people. So I think Angleton's going to be the big story that in our future book that we haven't really covered yet. Richard III's an easy villain. but Angleton's going to be this new villain that comes up in our future books.
It's becoming apparent, I think, to the viewers that McDuff was such a linchpin in all of this in so many ways, and I think that's probably why he kind of got caught in the crosshairs, would you say, George? And if John
There's
wants
no
to
question, and I'll let John talk about the Poisoner in Chief and all their dirty tricks with the Health Alteration Committee. And
I don't really want to go into those details right now, but just to say that I agree with your analysis, that, and it's mine too. I join in it. That look, I believe that my father was probably under some type of surveillance from these deep state people from the time that he was recruited to go to Loomis in 1933 or 4, and when they somehow his family, not his father, but his family of origin was somehow connected with Bissell, because Bissell Sr., the father of Richard and Bissell Jr., was the president of the Hartford Fire Insurance Company. My father's uncle, John, same name as me, became a vice president of the Hartford. So he was working under, but near Bissell, maybe a few layers down, but Bissell would have known the uncle, and the uncle seems to have been trying to steer, the guy that was trying to steer my father to force him to take the Bissell route of come and work for this, Sullivan and Cromwell and wear the white shoes and, help advance the interests of the already elite wealthy. And he just wouldn't do it. But they watched him. And so when he joined the FBI, think about what we know now, that the CIA guys had stuff on Hoover.
right.
So, yeah, they probably said, okay, you go ahead, you go work for Hoover, and we're going to keep an eye on you the whole time. That's the way I see it now. And then when Kennedy drafted him to go over to the Pentagon, the signature of it is the hepatitis. Because here he comes down suddenly, out of the blue, with what they call infectious hepatitis at the time. This is 1962, okay? I don't think they've even differentiated different strains, but it's hepatitis, and it's infectious, and he's almost dead. He turned yellow, jaundice, and he was in the hospital. And we had that note that we read yesterday that's from the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying, advance this man some sick leave, for goodness sake. He's used it up on this sickness already. And it was done. He got the sick leave. Somehow he recovered from the hepatitis and was, by the end of the year, getting superb ratings from his superiors as the best he could possibly be. So how did he recover so fast? How does that timing explain what happened? But now we finally know from Stephen Kinzer's book that the hepatitis was to set him up for the MK Ultra program, because they knew that history of hepatitis somehow contributed to manipulable personalities that could be manipulated, even maybe with all the crazy stuff they were doing, from the remote viewing to the LSD to the adrenaline, to all of the techniques that you've described from under Dr. Cameron at McGill. I don't know what they did, but I do know that his personality changed terribly, and that his last few years were of just terrific difficulties that impacted our family very badly. So I don't think there's any doubt about it that this was engineered by the Dulles crew, and that Richard M. Bissell Jr. was absolutely part of it. And I don't think that it's possible that it happened without Richard Helms' involvement as well, because, as you know, by 1962, Dulles no longer had the power in the CIA directly to do these things, but he still had his people there.
Yeah.
And so I don't think, and then of course they're trying to control him. They're still trying to control him to the end of his life, to make him do the things that they want him to do instead of his duty as an American patriot, military planner, and an investigative, an investigator of counterintelligence.
Yeah, and I think the book Poisoner in Chief really goes into, Stephen Kinzer goes into this in detail about Sidney Gottlieb going between the university in Montreal and this sort of Hudson Bay group of sort of Mossad with sprinkling in some CIA up there, and then shuttling that down to Washington. And it's told in the story Wormwood with Seymour Hersh with the Frank Olson story. So nothing here is not documented. And it was a 12-part series, I think, that they did on just the Frank Olson story. And it reminds me so much of what your dad probably went through at the end, because he was, got sullen, and, he was trying to fight the system, but it was like he was constantly being drugged. And if you've seen Wormwood, I think the way you've described those last years, it sounded a lot like Wormwood. So check that series out. Addy, we're ready for another one.
I have about a McDuff question.
Come to the.
Okay.
Addy, do you have anything else, or?
I just wanted to, if you wanted to segue before we get to Carol, I'll just ask you about how you wrote the book, because it's very condensed. And I saw you guys talking to Professor Hamamoto last night. He mentioned that too with your book on task force. So I like to ask authors about their writing process a bit. So.
Well, Dr. Hamamoto, having written several books, and then we've talked to Andy Craig, who wrote Presidential Puppetry. I think I got Len Bracken's book here, 9/11. All these, I call it journalistic writing, which is fact, and don't speculate. And then you can connect the dots at the end, but it does make for dense reading. And I don't know if it was Dr. Hamamoto that told me this, but he said, most new books, there's a core of 40 new pages, and then you get 360 pages of a recap. And the reason why they do that is you can't sell a 45-page book for $14.99. Just people have a weight expectation around a $14.95 book, and if you want a $29.99 book, you're going to have to write a 600-page book. And that's just the way it is. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to buck the trend. I'm going to make these books, I'm going to write as much as I can for 99 cents. And then on the Kindle version, then when I can no longer stay under that because they charge you for the amount of megabytes, then I'm going to go to the $1.99 as far as I can go with the book. And, you get that core that you really pay for with the $15 book, but it's a $2 book. And the paperbacks are only $4. So that's the idea of writing it. You can read this on a plane ride. You can read this on a bus ride. You can read this on a ferry ride, wherever you are. The idea is you leave, you're going to go visit some relatives, and like we're gathering here for any kind of gathering, and you're going to read a book, and then you're going to be able to tell all your relatives, hey, I read this on the plane, and I think you should have this. I think you would really find this valuable. And I'll go to Amazon right now and buy another copy for me. That's my viral marketing strategy. But that's the idea, Addy, is the common sense. Thomas Paine, came up with it first, the pamphleteer. But that's what changed the American Revolution, was a book for the common man expressing common sense, not someone who could quote, I'm not going to waste pages and pages with footnotes. If it's important, I'm going to put the actual McCone memo there about Oswald and the CIA. I'm going to put it right in as an image so you can see it for yourself. So that's a little bit of the strategy.
Definitely. Thanks, George. And before I sign off, I just want to encourage people to check it out. Even if you don't know much about the topics, any book lovers, I think, would love to add a brand new book to their collection for just $4 or $5, which I think is great that George is doing that. So I just wanted to thank John for hosting me on McDuff's channel, and then George for the chat as well. And then I'll hand it off to Carol.
Wait just one second, Addy.
Sure,
Tell everybody who doesn't know what's the name of your YouTube channel and how to get in touch with you.
Sure, yeah. Well, you can just YouTube Addy Ads, ADDYADDS. All of my chats with George have mysteriously disappeared from the YouTube ether. So you'll have to go to Brand NewTube to see that. That's a new company out of the United Kingdom that's very pro First Amendment, pro free speech, censorship free, especially when it comes to politics and news. So if people want to go on Brand NewTube, you can find me on there as well, ADDYADDS. And I will try to mirror our content that we've done the past couple of days on my channel. I
Please do. Yeah.
Might just name it like Planet Earth documentary or something that won't get banned. Because as soon as I put Webb with 2 B's, a bunch of lights go off in Ireland and Texas. So,
Addy, thank you. And the
Thanks,
kickback
George.
for the recommendation.
Did you sign Addy's book back yet?
I got to do that ceremonial. I signed actually 5 for Addy, but I'm going to ceremonially sign.
Yeah, please, George.
And
Thank
John,
you.
would you sign as well?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you guys.
So you're not seeing, John had a cam, so there's my signature for Addy already, and then I'll let John sign it right here, and you'll see that this is the first worldwide virtual book signing in our COVID times. And so you're all a part of history out there in the audience. You're seeing it for the first time, and I will produce the signature proof in just one moment. You're hearing the sound of history right now.
All right, Addy, keep the faith, brother.
Awesome. Thank
Show
you,
everyone
John.
just so we can prove that this is the first time ever in history. There it is. There's the proof. There you go. Thank you. Thank you, Addy.
Thanks, guys.
So we're going to bring in Carol. A lot of people call her the granola grandma from Oregon, whose farm is burning right now.
Really?
Well, it's in the.
It's looking like it's in the red.
Oh my God.
Step right up and eat that
Oh,
microphone.
okay.
Get real close.
Okay. Well, I'm going to move the
closer.
timeline
I
up
got
a little
I got it.
Okay.
to 1967, and which is past the timeline of the book, but it is the timeline of TDY, and I think when you're talking about McDuff recovering after the early 60s, this must have been one of his more important missions, and he was very significant in setting up a sting operation, CIA sting operation on the Vietnam War, on the other parts of the CIA that were running the heroin out of Laos and Cambodia. And the protagonist is a photographer who meets McDuff. And I just remember, John, how powerful it was when you got to that point, when you were reading the story, and you realized that this whole program was set up by your father. You recognized little things, that it could only have been him. And it was emotional for all of us to understand that. But for me, I never understood the Vietnam War. I lived through it, and the whole story we got was just not right. And then it all made sense. Usually the metadata, the programs that George has uncovered is that 2 sides are set up to fight each other, and then the resources are stolen. But what did Vietnam have? Well, what Vietnam had was the Golden Triangle drug trade, the heroin, and it had been run by France. And so this was the CIA's opportunity to take over that drug trade, and with Evergreen Airlines, which is our Evergreen Aviation. That was how it was going into U.S. cities directly. And Portland has been very, very impacted by that continuation. But my question about the book, about your dad, was in the book. At the end, the protagonist divulges his information to the one person he was supposed to have told it to, which wasn't your dad. It was another person. And you get this shadowing sense from the protagonist that he doesn't think that information is going to get to McDuff. That was the sense I got from the book. And I was just wondering, now that you know what you know, do you have any evidence at all that any of what was revealed to this supposedly CIA person, or the person who was supposed to be someone that your dad had authorized to get this information, do you have any sense at all that he ever got that information and that anything happened, or what?
Well, At the end of Doug Valentine's great book, TDY, you get the sense that the CIA has somehow learned about the operation. And generally, I would say that as a result of the way that it unfolded, my father would have absolutely realized that at some point this carefully planned operation must have gotten discovered, compromised, or somehow, because by the time you get to the end of the book, hey, if the book had a happy ending, the war would have ended, okay? We would have, but this book doesn't have a happy ending. I'm trying not to give it away because I want everybody to read the book and get it firsthand from Doug Valentine. But I of course, he would have known. It reminds me, Carol, of the time my mother came home from work that she had just took on a little side job to make a little money, and she came home one day and my father was sitting on the living room floor with his sword, and he had the sword over his knee, and this is the sword that was given to him upon graduation from Columbia Midshipman School in 1943 by a British admiral, by Admiral C.S. Holland. And my mother said that my father had the sword over his knee, and he said he was going to break it. It didn't mean anything. It didn't mean a damn thing, is what he said.
Was that
So,
1967?
I wish I knew. I wish I knew
How
what
old are
year
you?
that was.
Can you guess how old you were?
I was unaware of it until my mother told me about
I
it
see.
20 years later. Okay, so that's as close as I can get, is to say my mother, this is, family history given to me when I was actually, well, I won't go into my reasons for that at that time, but this is 20 years later, okay? But, and then also, when they gave him the award, the Meritorious Civilian Service Award, it was like the highest civilian award that can be given by the Secretary of Defense. And he told my mother that he was going to get this award in March of 1971. It was going to be given to him, but that he didn't really care about it. It wasn't important, and that we could come if we wanted to. So, of course, I wanted to go. I was about 14 or 15, and well, I guess it was 16 by then. But anyway, I wanted to go, and so we all went. We got all dressed up in their nice clothes, and we went to the Pentagon. And we went into this long series of chambers and past all these securities and desks and people, and we went into this vault. It was just like a bank vault where they opened the great big door that's like 2 feet thick with all the rings on it and everything. And we went in there, and they had this kind of red velvet podium, and some general said something and gave him this thing, and my sister still got this medallion that he got, and I've got the plaque and the award, but it literally meant nothing to him. He was by that time so disgusted with what was going on in the Pentagon that despite the fact that his colleagues were apparently trying to honor him, I think he knew that it was more of a kind of I don't know, something for the record, something to say we recognized that he did a great thing or did a lot of great things that'll never be talked about. But no, my dad was completely depressed by the end of his life, and he knew that there was no way out for him.
Carol, did you have a follow-up?
I'd like to thank John so much for all the books you've read to us over the last few years, and your historical perspective and commentary has been just so wonderful. But I would like to say something about Portland. I think that the drug trade, that I understood was actually coming right through the military. GIs were loading up the planes, Evergreen aviation planes, landing in Canby, Oregon, which is now maybe burned, the whole city.
And just for the clarification, there's a stop along the way there where there's the bulk of the C-130 traffic was broken down, and I believe it was Guam or someplace. But so Canby is a small airport, and the idea here being that once it got to the United States, it's broken out into these small aviation planes, the Barry Seal type plane. And because I know what's going to happen, there's going to be a troll or something that says, you can't land a C-130 at the Aurora Airport. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I hope everyone will send their best wishes to Oregon right now, because it is a slow-moving atom bomb moving up from the south up towards Portland, and it's terrifying, and many people are losing everything. So it's sad. But before the riots, we had so many problems from heroin and meth, and the drugs and the homelessness were much more powerfully impacted on the city of Portland than the riots were. It's just a huge problem. It's in every city of the U.S., and that's my cat lady grandma statement. We all have people we know who have died and suffered.
Yeah.
So it's everywhere.
Thank you, Carol. Carol's been at 3 of our newsroom simulations, what we call charrettes. And you get to know people better and better every time that you meet. We have some new people that you're going to meet. But it's great to go back to these people who are not the caricatures that they've been made out to be. Carol's never voted for a Republican in her life. The only decision she has to make is between the Green Party and the Democratic Party. So that's what she's told me. And, Jill Stein came to Oregon, I think, to get the one vote she got in the presidential campaign. I think it was to visit your house. No? Okay, maybe not. But McDuff signing the book, so we have history occurring twice, lightning striking twice right now. And then we're going to go to our next guest, which is going to be Tara. You may recognize Tara as the star of Somewhere Under the Rainbow, another banned Amazon book. You may remember her from her incredible rendition of Somewhere Under the Rainbow. Not over, under. You're under a bioweapons cloud in Somewhere Under the Rainbow, Kolomoisky weapons cloud. Here she is. We're going to use her last name as a cryptonym. Star is going to be her last name. Here's the one, the only, the incredible Tara Star. How are you doing, Tara?
I'm doing great. Hello, everybody.
Tara, what questions? First of all, I think you did Somewhere Under the Rainbow better than Judy Garland. I'm just going to say that right now.
We're trying.
You did really great. And if you haven't seen it, we fade from Judy Garland to Tara, and I think everybody said, "Damn, if only she'd have been alive when they originally filmed The Wizard of Oz." But now, Tara, what's your question for the book today?
Okay. Well, thank you, George. Thank you, John. I'm so glad to be with you here in person on Mystery Island. I just want to say that, these books are such a good... Anybody that's been listening to George for the past 4 years, we have a lot of information coming around. McDuff is the golden thread, through all of this. I know in my mind, the information really tends to bounce around. Kind of, you guys have heard me talk, so it's out there this way. George kind of has a similar thing. These books really do a good job of taking the information to somebody that doesn't know. It will be a perfect summarized introduction. But to someone that does know, it really helps capture the specific stories in a really understandable format. So even if you have all the information and these names and everything going around in your head, it really solidifies and pulls everything together. So personally, to think about what McDuff went through as a person who was, being basically must have felt like turned on by, the very people that you've given your life and career to. I really strongly believe that he has been with us, and that the angels that, had to lose their life through this, they did not give up. They're there for their families, and what we have right now is a bridge. And the bridge of everything, thank you guys so much for answering those questions. That was just wonderful to even think about, those details. I don't think I would have been able to put into words. But my question has to do with the bridge now. George, in this book, he put a lot of good questions that, we'd like to ask specifically. What would McDuff be thinking? What would he be doing in all these years? And we know that he is helping us in a metaphysical way, but as we are here, as humans trying to figure it out, what would he do? What would he think each step of the way? And right now, George asked, I'm not sure what page it was, maybe 17, what would McDuff do about the Trump coup right now? What would be his angle on that?
Well, I remember how meeting McDuff and hearing McDuff's story from John in person the first time changed my whole approach. I was sort of following the uranium, and I thought uranium-1, this is going to be the key to the blackberries and so forth. And so I was trying to follow let's say the cargo. And McDuff, in talking about his dad being the head of counterintelligence and doing counterintelligence, it's all about the network. It's all about the nodes of the network, but it's also about the connecting links of the network. It's understanding the network that you need to do counterintelligence. And I hadn't got that at that point. I was thinking uranium. Show me bills of lading. Show me all these things with the transport logistics and the Farsi-speaking trucking company and all that. And John is saying, no. I don't think you were recommending that I did more network analysis, but hey, dude, you do network analysis for computers. Why don't you try it for this BlackBerry network? If you can get that, wouldn't that be the way to unwind the network? If everyone would have had whatever communications devices the 9/11 hijackers used to carry that one off, wouldn't that have foiled the 9/11 attacks? Let's just say that there was 19 Saudi pilots. So that's my take on it, which was it changed. As you go down this path of learning to be an investigative reporter, it changes you and changes your style and changes your method when you meet people who inform you there's a better way to do this. And that's when I focused on the BlackBerries, and I really went into the IP addresses and looked at IP traffic. And, here's this traffic coming out of the U.S. Congress going to the line of control area in Pakistan, between Pakistan and India. And, oh, by the way, that's where the 5 bioweapons programs happen to be. And here's India saying these PAC-ISI guys are training the terrorists to use these bioweapons. So I guess that's the thing, is focus on the network connections between Pakistan, PAC-ISI, and the people in our U.S. Congress, hiding behind speech and debate privilege.
I do have to add something here. It wasn't me that came up with those ideas. My dad was a great person at things like network analysis. You can imagine that he was a master of all the different systems of warfare, from transportation to logistics to weaponry, and was able to create in my view, he's the guy that put together the task force that went to the Sante raid. And I think that's another secret that has been kept from history, just to keep my dad's name obscure. But to put together all of these incredibly different things into a working machine that can actually rescue prisoners of war, that is a task that requires quite a brain. I don't have that brain. But I do know somebody that has that brain, and his name is George Webb. So if you want to know what to do, or what would McDuff do, I can tell you. I think my answer is I'm going to ask George.
John, I remember you telling me a simulation game that was designed by McDuff called Task Force.
Right.
Believe it or not.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but let me just tell this story. When I was with my grandmother way back, I'll turn the camera around here. When I was with my father's mother, grandma, during her elder years, she had in an envelope, a brown manila envelope labeled Tommy's Game, and Tommy being her son, my father. And so I pulled it out, and it was these papers that he had done by hand with diagrams and all kinds of explanations and everything. And it turns out that my dad had created a naval war game. And it was sort of like the battleship game that you can play, but it was much more nuanced, and the rules of it are something I don't think I could conquer myself. It was, in other words, it was almost a computer game before there were computers. It's a very sophisticated thing. Well, I kept that, and I still have it. And when you think of the kind of a mind that could create that, then you can think maybe he was the planner for the Leyte Gulf landing, you know? And maybe that game worked its way into the midshipman school hierarchy because he was in the midshipman school at the time. It goes, you know, through the chain of command, and they say, "Hey, this guy's smart. Let's use him in our secret plans." I think that's pretty much what happened.
Yeah. Well, I've seen the game, and you know, when you're doing these, in the book again, I produce the documentation about a 266,000 person landing of Cuba, and across 4 different forces. We know McDuff was involved in STRICOM, this idea of coordination. Saxa was the coordinator among the 4 branches, military as well as the CIA and FBI. So we know that he's right in the middle of this, and Kennedy is deciding whether or not to pull the string on the second possible invasion. And then Allen Dulles, maybe from a proxy situation using Angleton as his proxy, or Bissell as his proxy, comes up with the missiles in Cuba. They stop the U-2 flights for 6 weeks, and all of a sudden, when the U-2s are back, guess what? We see now missiles in Cuba, and that option is taken off the table for Kennedy in the Cuban Missile Crisis in October of '62.
That's brilliant, and I don't think very many people have thought that through.
Yeah.
I just wanted to stop you because you ran right past that, but I think it's an amazing observation.
Yeah, because I mean, if you again read the historical record, look at the documents I show. In July of '62, there's some military planner who's kind of like a task force planner, where they have gotten that idea from. Who is putting a option on the table, not for Cuban refugees to take over Cuba in the kind of CIA way, so CIA can put in their puppet, but for the United States to go in and then create a pluralistic government that's from the people, and so that they can rule themselves and have self-determination. And that's what Bissell and Angleton wanted to stop. They wanted to take that out. Why would they stop right in the middle of this tension, right before an invasion? Why would they stop the U-2 flights for 6 weeks? And then when you turn the cameras back on, there are the missiles. And who produces those missiles pictures? The National Reconnaissance Organization. Richard Bissell, our Dark Richard III, produces those pictures for John F. Kennedy and takes that option off the table, takes the McDuff option. Maybe I'll call it the McDuff option. Takes the McDuff option off the table.
Again, I think you've hit upon a rationale that nobody has really voiced before. I mean, really, talk about making history. Well, you're doing it.
Yeah. Well, Tara, do you have a follow-up question?
I do. So I would just say that the questions that you lead into in this book, George, are incredible because, you know, it's not like you have to say, oh, it's definitely this way, but it's really setting up these routes of, you know, where it's coming from and where it's going, which is really important. One of the things that the book helped me to kind of pull together is a couple of things. One of the things you just mentioned, Cuba, that it seems to be this base of operations that they're trying to keep, control, whatever. But also with the kind of spying, satellite type things, and I don't totally fully understand it, but another bridge seems to be this Corona, is it a satellite?
Yeah, the Corona satellite, the bus-sized satellite.
Yeah. So of course Corona is crown, so I think their whole method is crown across the way. But with this spy versus spy thing, and with all this spying, that is something that I'm trying to grasp on, like where from McDuff's era to now, how that increased and continued.
Sure. What happened was when Bissell did the first undermining of Eisenhower in the Eisenhower peace process, what happens is Gary Powers is shot out of the sky. And what does Bissell, Richard Bissell, our Dark Richard III, what does he do when he goes into the Eisenhower the next time he sees him? He says, we can no longer do aviation surveillance. We now need to do aviation from the sky. We now need to do aviation from satellites. We're ready to do it. And our first project is going to be called the Corona satellite. The first project is going to be called the Corona satellite. And this launches, it was on the table already, but this immediately brought that up into 911 breakneck speed. We've got to do this thing overnight, and then launches all the Nazi scientists into satellite development and satellite surveillance. And then if you look at the protege of Richard Bissell, our Dark Richard III, his name is Corona, Krone. And he's the guy who launches his spy to go recruit Russians, a guy by the name of Paul Whelan, so much so that he gives him his private corporate jet. He's the guy who exfiltrates the F-1 rocket from the Saturn V program to a Russian company called Energomash. He's the one at the base of all these latest shots of satellites out of Cape Canaveral, where we've gone so many times with Elon Musk. So he has a competing company, Elon Musk. But what I'm saying is this satellite thread is a thread to pull on, and the spying thread is a thread to pull on if you want to unearth or expose this dark network, this dark weapons network, this dark surveillance network. So thank you very much. I very much believe those are the two threads to pull, amongst the other ones as well. Spying thread and here we are with the coronavirus. So is it one of those things where they keep winking to themselves at how cute they are?
Yeah, so cute.
Yeah. Thank you, Tara.
Okay,
and thank you for being the star of Somewhere Under the Rainbow. I'm sorry Amazon banned you.
I know. I'm part of a banned book now.
She's been at all 4 newsroom simulations, by the way. And if we do we're going to be going to Washington, and we're going to, unfortunately, Task Force is not here to play herself, but we do want to sort of do a reenactment around Capitol Hill and show what Task Force did in her year and a half of making Adam Schiff's life miserable. And so Tara will be playing. We're going to probably shoot Tara from the hair in the back, and so she will be playing Task Force. So you'll see Task Force, Tara's Task Force.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Tara.
Thank
All right.
you.
Did you get your book signed?
Oh, yeah.
Well, George already signed it, but I would love for
Let's
John to
do
sign
the-
it too.
Well, I'd be honored. All right, here we go.
And thank you, Thomas O'Loughlin Sr. You.
And can you do somewhere?
Under the rainbow.
Yeah, there you go. Ricky, the scat singer, she has a scat version of Somewhere Under the Rainbow. Ricky, what's her last name? Ricky Lee Jones, thank you.
Ricky Lee Jones. I'm going to check that out.
It's way better than whatever that Michael Jackson movie is where they redid The Wizard of Oz. What was that called? The Wizard.
Oh, The Wiz.
The Wiz.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
So more history. I'm on the history train now.
All right, and
Okay.
there's your fully signed
Thank
edition.
you so much. Thanks,
There you go.
guys.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Tara. Okay, so Dave, why don't you be the next one? So Dave is from Michigan. He's brought a lot of incredible insight into this war machine that was a part of Michigan. You did a big expose on the Willow Run bomber factory. We were talking this morning about Albert Kahn being the, him writing the 5-year and 10-year plans for Stalin. For the war factories based on Ford designs, Ford factory designs. You were talking this morning about the mentor of Les Wexner,
Was it
Max Fisher. You were
Max
talking
Fisher.
about Max Fisher this
Correct.
morning,
Yep.
and how this whole Bronfman gang with Meyer Lansky is still at play here, maybe even till today. So that's some of the things we talk about. He's just a great historian, and really has brought us a lot of insight. So, welcome, Dave.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to be here and be on the show. I've been, obviously very inspired by John and George, just kind of helping me put together a lot of, observations from my life that didn't really make sense just kind of left me confused. Like Albert Kahn is a perfect example. Like I always knew him as this, master architect of Detroit that did the Fisher Building, which is considered like an iconic Art Deco building. So I heard the stories of him like building the Detroit Athletic Club and him not being allowed to be a member there, and things like that. I didn't know the more of the manufacturing plant building that he was known for. I never had made that association until later, and then learning about Willow Run, and it's just that it was a mile-long factory building these B-24 bombers. And then the connection to the River Rouge plant that was the largest manufacturing facility in the world. So, Detroit is a place where people are very proud. We, we love our sports. We love our kind of blue-collar mentality, but we always feel like we're the underdog, or kind of like the, not as established as like a New York or London or Paris. It just Detroit is it's been the buddy. I mean, you're from Cleveland, so it's the same thing. Like the Midwest gets a lot of, it gets made fun of a lot, and so you grow up in that, and like you don't really believe that all these things can really be happening around you, because it is so much blight. It's like it's just a weird environment, because where I grew up is such a beautiful suburb. It's so nice. It's so affluent. So you live in this bubble where you live in this beautiful suburb, and then you can go 15 miles into Detroit, and it is, it's huge, and there's just a lot of rundown areas. So as far as following the story, like I've, I feel like this process for me has helped me really fill in a lot of areas that I just didn't really even know like what was out there. I feel like, again, the network analysis is really helpful, and I feel like that's what the historical study does. Is it teaches you the way that they sort of set up the systems so that they can, have covert activity basically, and have operations that are kind of parallel or off book. And I never understood that. I studied a lot of finance growing up, and it just was too confusing. It didn't make sense, and I feel like this is sort of a plug that really helps me kind of bring it all together.
One of the things we talked about this morning was that these factories, the only change they made to the blueprints for these Ford factories in Russia, this is also in Krylova's book, the one that had the meetings in Cambridge spy group in the Trump takedown, was the fact they made them bigger. That's the only thing. The bathrooms are all in the same place. The only thing is the factories were just bigger, and they on more grandiose scale. And these buildings that Kahn did are just absolutely gorgeous. I think he did the GM. Did he do the GM?
He did General Motors in the Fisher, which is right across the street.
Yeah.
So that's right, Grand River.
I saw it before it was torn down, and it was beautiful. These Art Deco. My mother grew up in Detroit in the 30s, and it was a Shangri-La, sort of. It was a cultural. Henry Ford had brought a lot of culture to the city, a lot of great architecture to the city. He had a kind of an everyman, I wouldn't say every man a king, but every man a scholar. Every man a scholar type of, and they needed that immigrant work base that was coming there to be educated, to learn how to use the slide rule, and be the broad shoulders of America. In the thing that moves America, the car. That was Detroit, and people don't know this backstory to Russia, and this is where this spying and exfiltration, and because it's the center of tanks. You're not too far from a tank plant there.
No, Warren, Michigan.
Warren,
very close.
You're not, obviously you're close to the aircraft manufacturing.
Yep.
And what do we have in the China nuclear deal with Hunter Biden we talked about this morning? We have anti-vibration technology, which can be used in cars. A lot of these things are dual use, or they can be used in aircraft. It's even more important to reduce vibration in jets, where it can cause death. And in missiles, it's absolutely critical because you pull up to 16 Gs on re-entry, and any type of vibration, any kind of nose cone wobble can mean the end of your missile. So, and we talked about the proximity fuse this morning.
Right.
Bill Taylor on our channel talks about that. So it really is, Dave has brought a rich set of this dual use idea. You know, Oleg Deripaska is going to meet all the three top CEOs after the crash. Right, in 2008, and where the government was giving them all the money. Why is Oleg Deripaska there? Why is he building the same factories just like Albert Kahn did 50 years later with our recovery money?
And buying big steel plants in Detroit also. He bought a big one.
Is this the Oleg Deripaska recovery plan, or is this the recovery plan? And Steve Feinberg with DynCorp is also the guy who engineered the Chrysler bonds.
Correct.
Again, are you trying to build the Detroit River Valley, or are you trying to build the Volga Valley in that little town? I can't remember the name of the town on the Volga where Oleg Deripaska has all of his plants. Mm-hmm. And then the helicopters. You're not far from the helicopter.
From Buffalo?
Well, no, Novi.
You mean Whalen? Oh, I thought you meant the
kamikaze helicopter landing
for
the Russian. You're not far from Kelly Services, where Paul Whelan got the Russians their visas.
Yeah.
You know, and then if you fly from the up to Sault Ste. Marie, where Peter Strzok was born, you're over the border. You're over the border in a helicopter ride in 5 minutes from Detroit to Windsor.
Easily. Yeah,
right.
I'm like 20 miles from the Detroit River, which is just you cross that.
All right, I'll let you ask your question. I'm sorry.
Okay, so my question is, with John, I've loved listening to the books. I've really gotten onto Fletcher Prouty, somebody that I just feel like I really connect with as far as his the way he describes things and sort of his philosophy. So I've really tried to lock in on this change in 1947 of the National Security Act, and sort of going through how Kennedy was trying to sort of unwind that system as far as using the CIA for the coordination of intelligence. And I was just curious, I guess, how you. I feel like I don't know the characters of like the Scarbeck case and those those events, but as far as like his transition from like the FBI, Prouty obviously has pretty strong opinions about the major changes that happened within the military and with the law enforcement. I was just curious, like how you thought McDuff would have what his experience would have been like as far as like going from somebody that was with MacArthur in World War II, and then seeing that transition, and sort of like how he would have thought of that those changes, and then obviously with Kennedy again taking another level of trying to change the way that the intelligence community was organized.
Well, thanks, David. First of all, guys, if you follow my channel at all, on the comment sections after a number of the videos, thanks, George. On the comment section on a number of the videos, especially recently, David has been sharing a lot of very interesting and in-depth knowledge of financial connections that go back many, many decades, and are very important to our studies. I think it's important for me to mention that now, because here you've come here asking to learn from George and asking me questions and all, and I feel that I need to ask you questions because you've got this expertise that I don't have. This is the only way we're going to solve this. We can't each of us try to do everything. So thank you, David, for being part of our community and for the comments that you drop. They really are helpful and often cause me to have to go and look something else up. So that's just one thing I wanted to say to you before I try to answer your question. My father would have been, I'm sure, because he would have known what's going on. He was horrified by it. This is the whole theme of our work is, you've nailed exactly what the problem in this country is today, is that a person who grows up thinking, I want to serve my country, I want to be the best American, I want to, comes from an Irish family, but this Irish family was determined to shed its Irishness, like many of them were at the end of the 1900s, when being Irish was a very bad thing, even in Ireland or here. It was, so this particular family was trying to shed its Irishness, and I think the way that they were trying to do it was to work their way into the WASP Society through the Hartford Insurance and the established people there. And my father didn't have the character to give up his own personal individual rights and his own individual ability to judge right from wrong and turn all of his life over to this machine. He saw it. He would have seen it growing up, and he was fully aware of it by the time he died. I think that's why he was so sad. He couldn't talk about it, because if he said a word, then he was putting us in danger. So the best I can tell you is, to answer your question, he would have been screaming bloody murder if he thought it would do any good, but he knew that it wouldn't at that time. So he just had to let things develop as they did.
I'll just add to that with, Dave has been a great contributor as well. And, sometimes when you see someone else trying to, move the pins around and move the yarn around, and you go, oh, I never thought of that. Oh, I never thought of connecting those things. This is what people say I do for them. It's a two-way street. And Dave's definitely one of those people who's trying to process it. I do agree with Tara, or maybe Tara's, the analogy is you put it in the centrifuge, and it's unenriched or lightly enriched, not like Bob Mueller, who's highly enriched. But you spin it and you keep culling down, whether it's a bioweapon that you're trying to spin down or whether it's uranium. You then have this really dense product at the end, which is intelligence, right? This is our funnel. We used it as a symbol. It just turns out to be the uranium symbol. But Dave represents that to me. And the more centrifuges we get going, the faster we get to highly enriched intelligence that we can provide to the world and to the Trump campaign to make a difference. And we've seen this happen with narratives. We've outed the narrative, and then all of a sudden, hey, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is visiting sorting facilities at 4 a.m. in the two major counties that are going to determine the election. I wonder if she wants to keep the polls open by doing a bioweapons attack like they did in 9/11, because the anthrax attack was hard on the heels of the plane attack. And, if she has the bioweapons network to Pakistan with Imran Awan, and Rahm Emanuel has the plant there with Imran Awan's dad, why wouldn't they use the anthrax? And why wouldn't it be another anthrax 911? We don't know the answer, but when you vocalize it, when you say, hey, this is a possibility, and they've done it before. I actually talked with a lab mate of the person they hung this thing on, Ivans, then it screws up their narrative. Everybody's asking, why the hell is Debbie Wasserman Schultz at these sorting facilities? And so that, Dave, I just want to say, Dave was instrumental. I'm sorry I'm making this about you, but it is about you. Dave was instrumental in this card game, which is bioweapons. We were going to call it bioweapons poker, but it's more like a euchre deck, so maybe it's bioweapons euchre. But you basically, you got Redfield, you've got Burks, you got Sina Bavari there leaving the door open at Fort Detrick, letting all those things out. There you got Peter Strzok using the bioweapons all over Africa, Asia, and so forth. You'll meet in a minute. You'll meet Ellen, and she said, no, it should be euchre. There's Peter Strzok Sr. But by just using these playing cards, this was Dave's idea. It's like, this is how you learn. It's kind of like, okay, if you want to use baseball cards to learn baseball and get inside baseball, this is the way you learn bioweapons right here. That was Dave's brainchild among many. So I just wanted to give you credit where credit's due.
Thank you. I feel like that was my, I was a big baseball card collector, and I do feel like it, helped me get the ins and outs of all the sports, all the angles. And so I'm trying to do the same thing with history and, just understand the players. I feel like there's so many people, but the real benefit is understanding what the systems are that they use, and then it's much easier to just sort of insert characters in different eras to, play the different roles that are required for the system.
Yeah, and I wanted to, can I embarrass you for a minute?
You can, I guess.
Yeah.
I think you will anyway. So
I will anyway.
Agree.
Well, Dave was a part of this YouTube's Finest Hour. I wrote a book about Dave and Dave's contingent, but Dave was the megastar that came out of this YouTube's Finest Hour video, which went viral in China. And 655,000 views in 4 hours before it was taken down. And now they've taken down the book about the event, which is YouTube's Finest Hour. But you're called the woo-woo kid.
The what?
The woo-woo kid in Wuhan.
The woo-woo kid.
Yeah,
I've never heard that.
Yeah, while they're cleaning up the detritus from the Wuhan attacks from August 2019. While they're cleaning up that detritus, now they have the very handsome Dave Underdown to think of when they look at the citizen journalist that was key in bringing a lot of that story to us. So I want to say thank you for being a part of YouTube's Greatest Hour and that history.
That was great. I love being part of the group, and it's been. I work independently mostly, so it's very exciting for me to be with talk to people and participate. So
awesome. Thank you, Dave, and thanks for wearing the Fidrich hat. It makes me think of the bird.
Did you get your book signed?
I did not get my book signed, so I need that.
All right, I'll take care of that while you introduce the next.
Well, I'm going to move a little bit here to introducing Ellen. She's the one who said no. She's actually from my hometown in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is an amazing connection. I knew her brother who was killed in a car accident in my class, and she didn't go to Fort Wayne Northside, but she went to Bishop Dwenger. But she's one of those great, oh, there you are, you're here. Oh, great. But now in Colorado, she runs Team W in Colorado. Until we have a Colorado Springs contingent, she's running it from Boulder, Colorado, not far from Rocky Flats, and Bob Mueller, doing his stuff. So Ellen, we met you in Colorado recently, and when we were coming back at the book signing from California. And why don't you take it from there, and wherever you want to intersect.
I just really want to thank you for letting me be here. And just to say that I only have a comment, because is this wrapping it up? Am I the last person?
I think if Todd wants to be on, we'll ask Todd, but
Okay.
Another person from Boulder. So
I just had a comment from having had this affinity with watching you, George, and connecting the dots, and then bringing John into the program here, John has just this great inflection in his voice, a great way of making people feel safe. He's just like Captain Kangaroo and Captain Green Jeans. We get to be, it's like this comfortableness that we get to be around.
at least you left out
Family.
Mr. Rogers, so I feel better about that now.
So I just wanted to say thank you, John. And from the McDuff, this angle of where your dad came in, I think of it could be anyone. It could be some office worker or a driver, someone who heard conversations and saw this. But your dad was right in the thick of it and was able to be part of something that you have at. And I wish there were other people out there that were able to know that their aunt was sitting behind a desk at the Pentagon and saw things. And people know. People aren't stupid. We know that there's things that are going on behind the scenes that aren't able to feel comfortable enough to be able to bring it forth. So thank you so much. This is my book, and I haven't had it signed.
Okay,
And
great.
I love the fact that it is such. It's not tackling a 400-page book. You can just sit down and read it a couple of times, because from the angle of your father, it's just this whole other dive. I mean, all the books that have been written about JFK assassination and the depth in which people have thought that they've researched it, and then coming from Thomas O'Loughlin's angle, it's really exciting. It brings it home because
Well, especially the new research. Yeah, I think that's the key, that people go, oh my God.
Yeah.
With these new records, all those old books just were so far off about Oswald not being in the CIA. You wonder how even they took him seriously now that we see the documents. So, Ellen, thank you so much. We're going to have to end it right here because we're way over time. But John, you want to do the wrap, and I will sign the book.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ellen. Sorry.
All right, here we go, guys. Thanks so much for being with us today here on McDuff Channel. I apologize to the folks on the chat room because I haven't been able to monitor it with other duties to keep the cameras lined up right. So, but this has been the very first ever virtual book signing, and George Webb is busily signing a book here for Dave, and he's got a stack of them for you too. He has offered to send you an autographed book if you contact him, and I don't. Is that completely free, or do they have to pay postage? How does that work, George?
No, all you have to do is, if you're not a Patreon of McDuff, become a Patreon, and for 1 month, and nothing to do with me. Just become a $3. You have a $3 level.
Yeah, we have. Well, we just don't have any levels. You can become a Patreon at any level. Thank George. That's awful nice of you to do that.
I want this to be to build McDuff's, because I'm getting, we're getting a Georgetown litigation attorney here at $300 an hour, and we're not paying a dime. so that what I really want to do is I'm going to send you 2 books that are worth. Street price is $8, and I'm going to spend about $4 more sending it to you. So anybody who's currently a Patreon of yours is eligible.
Great.
And then anybody else who becomes a Patreon of John, and then I only have 50 of each. So and I've given a lot of them away here. So I have to do a drawing out of but most people are going to get a book.
And of course we'll both sign them.
Yep.
And George, that's very generous of you. Thank you so much. So the channel is growing. We've crossed the 11,000 mark now, and we just keep on growing here at McDuff Channel. So thanks very much. We do appreciate the support for the expenses.
And I'll leave it right there. And I just want to say a quick pan to the audience here, and thank you to Peter Duke. Peter, why don't you come around here? And he's the guy tirelessly working with $40,000 worth of camera equipment that's for free. I like free. Todd?
No charge. It's not free.
Oh, it's not free. Okay. Yeah, you're going to pay for it one way or the other. And Todd, we're just not going to be able to work him in because we're way over time. But you will meet Todd in the next. He was telling me about putting DuPont explosive down a oil shaft and doing seismic analysis, just like, here's a guy doing the field work, just like I described with Sierra Geophysics and the stuff I did with them. So it's great to have these people from different walks of life that confirm the reporting, and we're constantly doing that. That's our number one thing, is to constantly do the cross-checking. So thank you very much.
Thanks again, everybody, and we'll be back with you soon. Tonight I have a show listed for 8 o'clock. I think I'm supposed to be reading the very last portion of JFK, but I have an open mind about it. If anybody wants to do anything else, 8 o'clock tonight, we'll do something, that's for sure, on McDuff Channel. Talk to you then.